Tuea harum hoktub sin mas ibet baya. Imatipin sumpike sitsue yatue yatue yatue.
No! You must not read from the book!
Tonight, the screams of the dead will fill the night air, and the blood of the innocent will be spilled.
I think museums have got to try and think about what will people 100 years hence think about what we do now. That's a major consideration.
The exhibition Golden Mummies of Egypt is the Manchester Museum's first international touring exhibition in 30 years at least. It consists of over 100 objects, including 8 mummified people, from the Greco-Roman period of Egyptian history. We are not focusing on revelation and the kind of biomedical techniques often associated with Manchester Museum in particular, but understanding the decoration and the religious beliefs behind the process of mummification. I can remember very clearly my first encounter with ancient Egypt. It was seeing a mummified body in Kelvin Grove Museum in Glasgow. And I remember very clearly, maybe being 5 or 6 years old, going into the museum and being disappointed that the mummified body was not like a Hollywood movie. So from that moment, something switched in my head and I just became fascinated with anything that I could get my hands on that was to do with Egypt. So from about 5 or 6 years old, without knowing what an Egyptologist was, I wanted to be one. I came up with the idea of Golden Mummies of Egypt, maybe about 2016. But you know, life gets in the way, and in that period, the next year, sadly, my father died, and it made me think differently about these are people's relatives that we have custody of, in a way. And for some people, I would say a minority, that is something shocking and that is something difficult and that's something actively reprehensible. How can you claim to possess or to own someone else's relatives? This beautiful mummified body of Isaias was chosen for the exhibition because of how well preserved she is. But she was in some ways, a lucky one, because her body was preserved in such a way that it would be considered for museum display. She was excavated in 1911 by Egyptian archaeologists working for a British excavator named William Matthew Flinders Petrie at the site of Hawara in Egypt, which would have been very important in the time of Isaias. And there is evidence that people, once they died, wanted to be buried there. And one of those was Isaias. Isaias is quite unusual because we have her name written in Greek on her cartonnage mummy mask. She was often known as Demetria, but Demetrios, the male version of Demetria, was the name of her father. And so her name is Isaias, daughter of Demetrios. She's got a golden mask with inlaid eyes. She is wrapped in linen bandages, covered in resin. You can see a shroud, and the shroud is very colourfully, brightly decorated with scenes of Egyptian gods. And they show scenes like the mummy being tended by the god Anubis, a winged goddess, and Isaias herself in the company of gods. Under her feet, on that foot case, you see beneath her gilded toes, modelled in plaster, you have the enemies of the deceased, and they are being trampled for eternity. So all in all, Isaias is set up for a blissful afterlife. The CT scan data we have for her confirms she's an adult woman whose remains are encased in the bandages, but actually saying anything else definitive is almost impossible. And so we're going through the organic store. So this is wood, plant materials, and also human remains. So this is where we keep mummified remains, and this is where Isaias will come back to when the exhibition is over. So this is a section of the outer shroud of the mummified body of someone contemporary with Isaias. And it's absolutely typical of what happened to the remains of people like her if they were found in more damaged condition. She was taken wholesale from where she was found in Hawara. And then eventually she was moved to the museum, probably in Cairo. So Isaias was judged to be in pretty good condition, and she was permitted to be exported, and she came to Manchester. The detail of this goddess, this winged goddess, is picked out in gold. So this is the goddess Nephthys, and so she helps and protects and supports and deifies, if you like, the deceased. She makes the deceased suitable for eternity. And we know the ancient Egyptians were very clear on this point, that gods have flesh made of gold. And so if you can afford it, you have a golden mask to show that you have been transformed into the form of a god, exactly as Isaias has. Flinders Petrie describes in his journals and his diaries, of the mummified bodies he found, maybe 2 or 3% only were decorated. The ones that were not decorated, he says himself, were heaved over by the dozen every day. They were totally nameless. Archaeology is destruction, and a lot of destruction went on at the hands of Flinders Petrie. So Isaias was immediately seized upon as a well-preserved, very striking-looking artifact, if you like, that would be totally suitable for people in England, as Petrie himself says, because the people in England are Philistines, and they will be impressed by gold. But there has to be an acknowledgement that people like Flinders Petrie, who were responsible for the excavations that produced most of the material in Golden Mummies of Egypt, he was very into eugenics. He was a racist. There's no sidestepping that, because those questions and the work Flinders Petrie did cast a very long shadow. I wanted to just be a bit more transparent about what we think now. And the honest answer is we probably know less, if we're being honest now, than Petrie claimed he knew 120 years ago. Naturally, any practice changes and evolves. It's not that everything in the past that was done is wrong or was bad. Fashions change, priorities change, sensitivities change.
In June 1975, at the University of Manchester, began an investigation of 17 human mummies. There were 2 layers of bandaging. The outer layer was narrow and arranged in diagonal patterns.
It's not that things are always improving, absolutely not. But I wouldn't do things that I did 12 years ago when I joined Manchester Museum. I wouldn't do things as they were done 50 years ago or 100 years ago. The mummies are still with us. So I will, if anything, I have more direct contact with the mummified people in storage. But I will miss people's reactions, because you got it a lot on social media. Generally positive, comments on visitor books or comment cards, where people ask questions about aspects of what was on display, or they tell you you've done a good job.
Pop it down.
Yes, there were challenges. Yes, there were pretty, difficult moments. I mean, it's about how you sit with your own conscience. You know, you have to sit with discomfort about this fact that you are touring the remains of dead people for money and for entertainment.
Okay, off the blocks this side. Yeah.
But I think it was a once in a lifetime, once in a career opportunity. I don't think I will personally be responsible for another international touring exhibition exclusively on Egyptian material. Certainly not focused on mummified remains again. It's funny to see the space as it was over a year ago, well over a year ago, because we installed golden mummies 3 months before the museum reopened. So it's been here for maybe 15 months, 16 months, and it's been on the road for 4 years. So to come back and find all the objects gone, Isaias crated up, put back in storage, is sad. Because it was a project I really loved. We had 1 million visitors, over 1 million people came to see it, the biggest exhibition we've ever had in Manchester Museum's history. And now it's finished.
The story is never over. Isaias will probably still be in this museum when all of us are dead and buried. Isaias' name will survive, and she will have an afterlife that we could never dream of. But we have one text from around the time of Isaias in which a ghost says to a living person, please would you move my body closer to the remains of my family, because I want to spend eternity with them. So by that judgment, by that text, if we read it literally, presumably Isaias would not want to be in England at all. So what's worse, being destroyed or slowly degrading in a desert in Egypt, or being preserved thousands of miles from home? We don't know.